Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I've got Ed Hajim with us today. He's on the road less traveled, an unlikely journey from orphanage to boardroom. He's got a fantastic story, and I'm really happy to have him on the show. So, Ed, welcome.
It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, briefly introduce yourself, and we'll dive right into the conversation.
I wrote my book because I actually, after burying my background, the first 18 years of my life for about 50 years, my wife and my children, and eventually the University of Rochester, where I was chairman of the board of trustees, wanted me to write my life. So I wrote the book On the Road Less Traveled. My early life was in foster homes and orphanages. I was a street kid. I've been very lucky. I got into the University of Rochester, and I was an engineer. I was in the Navy for a while, an engineer. While I went to Harvard Business School, graduated with a significant amount of debt and a negative net worth. And 40 years later, I was able to give the largest gift in the history of the University of Rochester. And they named the engineering school after me, which allowed me to have at least 400 or 500 students a year pronounce my name correctly, which it's Ed Hajim. Hajim sounds much better, but it's Hajim. So I've had a wonderful life. At the Harvard Business School, I was the chairman. I was the president of the Alumni Association, and during my tour of duty, I created something called the Entrepreneur's Toolkit, which is now has morphed into one of the most successful courses in the school's history. I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. I've also worked for companies. So I've had my falls and my rises on a regular basis. I can answer any questions you have about almost anything, given the amount of years I've spent 408 years on the planet. I've made all the mistakes you can make, and I've had a few of the successes that came during my lifetime.
Yeah, so talk about just one thing that really fascinates me is usually, because I had a lot of friends in high school, they were super successful, like they had great starts, and then if you looked at them now, like after like they didn't, like they just have regular ordinary lives, they don't do anything outstanding. So what is it that hardship and just turmoil and just, it sounds like the most superstars, the achievers, like the Steve Jobs, the Bill Gates, all these people have is something like they have something extremely traumatic happen to them. So why is that?
Chris, that's exactly right. I make the pitch that disadvantages become advantages. Spending my age 5 to 10, I was in 5 different Catholic foster homes, which went from being cold and abusive to being warm and caring. I was in 5 different Catholic schoolyards, and it teaches you adaptability, teaches you resilience, it teaches you perseverance. It also eventually gives you some self-confidence that you don't have to go through those trials. When I was 11 years old, my father had to go to sea, and he would put me with a neighbor lady who changed her mind at the last minute. And so he went to sea, left me in a hotel room where I went to delicatessen for dinner for a period of that time. And even in September, when I was supposed to be taken in by the neighbor lady, she said no. So he found an orphanage, and I reported to an orphanage by myself at 11 years old. So those are the kind of things that make you quite adaptable, quite resilient, but also makes you angry as well. So you pick up certain things along the way. Some people channel their anger into self-deprecation. So I channel the anger into success. It drove me. For the first 20 years of my business career, I was going to do well no matter what. I was going to produce financial security. So I did it. And then, of course, I pivoted to some extent in mid-career, doing some of the things I wanted to do rather than seeking this financial security and financial success.
Yeah. It's quite interesting because I've attended a number of self-improvement programs, and the underlying thing is, for example, you had 2 sisters, and like one of them was vowed that she'd never get rejected from, and then she develops her attributes. And there's another one that like they grew up on welfare, and then so she vowed that she would never be in that situation and circumstance, and now she's a multimillionaire. So it sounds like these things were never and your musts. You draw your line in the sand and say, I will never do this, or I'll never be in this position again. And what
drives you, it truly drives you. But you also have to have a vision, and then you have to have a little bit of luck also. But it's hard work, a little vision, and some luck. But you do this early life where you have disappointments and you have crisis and you have disadvantages. You basically build up a capability to say, I'm going to overcome this. And that's what drives you. In America, you can do that. And also being born at the right time. Remember, I was born in the middle of the Depression. and then the war. And now we've had 40 wonderful years where, pretty much anybody who's successful who works hard.
Yeah, I was joking to my wife the other day, and it was like, yeah, if you were born in the boomer age and you are not a millionaire, you did something wrong.
But that's almost cool. And then the other hand, you look at my father, born in 1900, it's a terrible life. I mean, first you had the Spanish flu, Spanish plague, then you had the First World War, then you got a few good years in the 20s, then you had the Depression, then the Second World War, and then the 70s were not terrific, so he really didn't have much of a shot. We've had 40 years. People don't realize that in 1983, the stock market was 600. Let's use 1,000, make it easy. Dow Jones 1,000. Today it's 40,000. Well, in my book, I talk about getting the wind at your back. We've had the wind at our back. And of course, in certain places, the wind was stronger than other parts. If you were in the automobile industry or some other industries, you might not do well. But you got into the right industry, there's a lot of places where your wind was right at your back. And that's one of my messages to young people is to look at the drivers of the system and find the wind at your back. You find or read biographies that most successful people have the wind at their back at some point in their careers.
Yeah. Talk about when this drive to succeed and the success becomes unhealthy. Like it's good to do well and give back, but talk about the dark side of success where it costs you your health or your family, your marriage, and how you need to balance those two.
In my second book, I make it very clear that there are 4 parts of life: self, work, family, and community. Community is my word for giving back. And I define success as being not balance between those things. Balance is not a real word. There's no such thing as balance. It's the harmony between those things. Because when you work, in order to be successful, you have to focus. Once you focus on your work, you neglect some of the other parts of your life, yourself or your family. The concept is to constantly review where you are. And as you're out of balance, continue to move back into balance or try to develop a harmony between those 4 elements of life. And they're really important. Each one contributes to what I call success. And you'll find out the most problems especially with males and females that are entering the workforce today, they focus on work too much. And then they lose track of either themselves, they have poor health, or they lose their family. And there's nothing worse in my mind to be a successful businessman who's gotten divorced. I mean, it's one step forward, one step back. It just doesn't work. And then, of course, you get divorced, you have problems with your children and so on and so forth. So it's recognizing early in life that there are these 4 parts that you have to focus on a regular basis. Early on, we focus much more on self. Then you spend some time on family, and then you spend time on work. And then you basically, like I am, you're spending much time on communicating, giving back. I can give up work to some extent and may say, no, it's like juggling a series of balls in the air. And you have to keep juggling them because you have to move to the other one, catch that next one that comes down. Some balls bounce. The work ball could bounce. The family ball sometimes doesn't bounce. The self ball doesn't bounce.
Yeah. Really. And so that kind of, because I have colleagues that I went to school with, and like, for example, like one of them took company public, but like he's got billions, but he's like alone. Like he has a partner, but like no spouse, and it's what they call lonely at the top.
That's what happens. Is if you spend too much time on one of these areas, time and energy, you don't develop the skills to be good at the other one. And family it's a skill. I remember getting in my car at night. Now, first of all, I refused to go to dinner meetings, even though I was the chairman. Very rarely I'd go home in my car to my family for dinner. And when you're way home, you've got to shift from being a businessman to dealing with your 6-year-old who says, my girlfriend just decided she was not my friend any longer. And that was more important to her than anything you did all day long. Now, if you don't realize that, you're in trouble. In my car, I used to always give myself a Bible lesson set. Now you're a father, you're no longer a businessman, back and forth. And you have to do that. It's a trick. But you have to come home at night and your wife has had a tough day. You've just dealt with major deals. You did a big merger and acquisition deal. You hired a really good guy or a good gal. And then you come home and the bottom fell out of the laundry bag. And I had it right in the middle of I was going to the laundry. And that was terrible. You have to accept that. And the ability to convert is a very important thing. And early on, recognize it. You have to decide. And if you don't recognize that, then you will emphasize one too much. And even sometimes people emphasize their family too much, and then they're not successful work-wise. If they're happy with it, that's fine. And then this your friend who made a book, he should have said, look, I'm going to become a billionaire and that's going to make me happy. and I'm basically not going to have a great family. I'm not going to have many friends. That's, if you decide that, and then you get there, you say, okay, this is what I decided. But if you want that harmony, then you got to spend time. There are many cases of being promoted too fast. One of my theories was make money slowly so you can adjust to it as time goes through. And I've been very lucky. I didn't make a lot of money early. I've been in it all through my life, still making it in real estate. This was the real estate during our lifetimes have been just unbelievable. I'm in Nantucket now, and real estate here is ridiculous.
Yeah. And a follow-up question I have for you is, because I've noticed this among successful individuals. You have, for example, two people, and they have one grows up in adverse circumstances, and there's a lot of emotional trauma. Another person grows up with the same drive, but he or she has positive influences, like emotionally, that he or she is really healthy. And you put the same drive together and the same work ethic, the same mentors, and the one that seems to be healed emotionally, that doesn't have that kind of grudge or isn't doing things from an unhealthy standpoint, they seem to do better than the unhealthy ones. Explain that concept to the audience.
I think that's exactly right. But it is a personal experience. I was angry because as a youngster, I kept saying, why me? Why am I in orphanages? Why am I in foster homes? Why can't I have a car? I had no money. I worked every afternoon at the grocery store, or the worst job in the world. I was a pin setter before automatic pin setting. I was angry, but then you have to sit down with yourself. And this is my pitch to young college. I just finished a 2-hour session with a university, telling kids when they're 18, 19 years old to start to find out who they are. And here's the part of me I want to keep. Here's the part of me I want to get rid of. Here's the part of me I want to add to. And it's a personal experience. And we don't do enough of that with young people. The part of me I wanted to get rid of was my anger. I directed my anger to being successful. But when you mentioned something which which is very important, is mentors. Try to find people. I don't believe in heroes. That's the first thing. I believe, Winston Churchill's one of my heroes. I love his perseverance. I don't want his drinking problem. The same thing as Steve Jobs. I want his creativity, but I don't want his personality. So I want to take from those heroes, the people that I consider to be interesting, take certain traits, but not all of them. In this case, I believe find a mentor or a person who has some of the characteristics that you're trying to emulate or find out, and get close to that person and deal with them and get them to help you out. Go find someone who's been where you're going. And that's very important. That person can help you through it and also can tell you the downside of trying to do this. You'll find out that, you can't take that promotion because that promotion is going to cause you to travel around the world, and that's going to destroy your family because your wife can't handle that. Now, some wives can handle that. So these are all quite individual. We're not any real, here's exactly what to do. These are a lot of very personal decisions. That's what I'm presumptuous. I want these 18, 19, 20-year-olds, for the first time in their life where they have control of themselves, to find out who they are. Who am I? Where do I want to go? How am I going to get there? I always say that some of the things I learned in college were probably useful. Learn how to think, learn how to work. A lot of the technical stuff was worthless. I was a super slide roll guy. Went in the Navy, came out after 3 years, and they put a slide roll in the garbage pail. There's something called a computer that look over completely. All that great capability that I had isn't useful at all. So anyway, that's not a good answer to your question, but it's extremely difficult to figure out. But I find those people who are successful spend time by themselves. And in today's world, they get help. In my day, you couldn't get help because it got help. People rejected you. But you can get help. You get help with either friends or actually professional help to sort out who you are, or you take a Johnson O'Connor test, find out what you really like and so forth. But a lot of introspection. And I wanted that to be done at the college level because I don't want that done formally. I want kids to say, I'm going to get myself a diploma and a life design written so that I can, in pencil, of course, because you're going to change a lot of times, but just go through some of those questions. And while you're at college, test those things. Test it. Some of your people that are unsuccessful or unhappy, they didn't get a chance to test certain things. And I go further. I said, practically don't waste the summer. If you're interested in something, try it out. Anyway, long answer. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah. And so I really love that piece of advice. And you mentioned something earlier on, you were talking about education. And I know that education's extremely valuable, and you gave a lot back to the University of Rochester. What is your view on education? Because I know a lot of youngsters these days, they're trying to bypass, take shortcuts, not go to school. They have the internet, they got social media, and now we have a new technology known as artificial intelligence. As you mentioned, you had a slide rule and then the computer and calculator came. So how do you view education and unlocking potential through
Well,
education?
I have three major elements. One is anything is possible. I'm proof of that. The second one is education is the solution to almost everything or everything. And in today's era, it's even more important because these kids are going to have to pivot. Education is a lifelong process. When I was at the business school, I said basically business school students at Harvard should come back every 5 years and get re-dipped because the game has changed. Now you go from slide rule to the computer, you've now gone to the internet. I didn't have the internet when I was at business school. Now you're going to AI. You need to get re-educated. And if you're going to live like these young people are to 100 years old, you're going to have to pivot a number of different times. And a lot of stuff you're going to learn that was good 20 years ago is wrong now. And for example, our kids don't have to write anymore. They really don't. I just learned about 2 or 3 years ago, you talk into your phone and it prints it out. That's much faster than writing it. So there's a lot of things. And I used to spend time at the Catholic school doing cursory, hours and hours. I remember memorizing the multiplication tables. All that stuff is gone. So that you can just project ahead. A lot of things like AI, for example, can do a lot of things. AI, what is AI? AI is basically me times 100. It's everything I do times 100, or times maybe order of magnitude more than that. But it recognize that really changes a lot of things. And AI will be like the internet. It'll have some positives and negatives. But that's what these young people have to recognize, that through their lifetime, they're going to have to be re-educated. I think that's definitely, and I'm pitching senior education for everybody. And of course, even me, I go back to I was an engineer. I couldn't write very well. I took a couple creative writing courses in order to write my books. I thought education is absolutely essential. I'm actually, one of my other crusades is what they used to call vocational education. I really want to produce more nurses, more marine engineers, more chefs, more HVAC people, more carpenters. Those people will not be replaced by AI. They won't. If you give somebody that kind of capability, they'll never be homeless. And so the community colleges, and I want to change that word from vocational to professional. And it is. When a plumber comes, the guy said the landscape guy makes as much as some engineers make in technology industries, and he's happy. And it's a wonderful job. He's outside all the time. The guy, I'm the lead director in our golf club. The guy who does my ground kid makes a lot of money, and he really loves his job. And it's not simple. There are 10 kinds of grass. 4 of those kinds basically are endangered species. You can't spray those babies because they'll come around and find you. So there's so many other things people can do that I think but it is education. It's the groundskeeper has a master's degree in garnish. So that's the kind of thing that I think has to be done more of. And I'm sponsoring this down at the community college in Key West and in Key Largo. And I'm actually, our golf club gives 15 professional scholarships a year now to kids out in Nantucket High School. It's education. It's the answer. But the college education is a cauldron. It's a place where you can make mistakes and find out who you are. And I think you spend more time on that formally.
Yeah. What is your advice to the younger generation about mentorship and what qualities and how do you seek one? A lot of my mentors were through books, but also just through everyday experiences. And how have you used mentorship to pay forward in your career?
I started out with people who have wanted to mentor me, which obviously when you're young, you want somebody who's interested in you are. You have no special path. I had a fellow in the orphanage who I wouldn't trust anybody because of my background, but he wanted to mentor me. He did a good job. And then I had a professor, my mechanical engineering professor, mechanical drawing, just took a liking to me and started to help me get through college. So then later on in life, I selected mentors who had gone where I wanted to go. Been there, done that kind of guy. Even when I was a very sophisticated financial executive on Wall Street, I found someone 10 years older than me that had gone, through the processes I'd gone through. A fellow named Wally Stern. And I would always call Wally up when I had either a difficult problem or when I was going to change jobs. So having mentors is absolutely most important. That's been proven time and time again. You take troubled high school students and give them somebody to talk to, or even I'm involved in a group called Wiley, WILY. It's a group in Boston. They have 75 students now that they help. The kids sign up and they give them a counselor. They're all foster home kids. And these kids must talk to their counselor once a week. And they have nobody flunking out at MIT, Tufts, Harvard, all the Boston schools. And they go into 200 of these kids. And it's basically, and they were absolutely necessary because when COVID came, these kids had no place to go. So they call a counselor, I'll put you in a hotel, I'll put you with his family. They had somebody who's in their camp, and that's somebody who believes you. And by the way, people are much more cooperative. If they're not, you don't want them anyway, but find somebody that that sort of seems, it's been where you're going and or her, the question. Or just someone who is really interested in, but in most cases, I want to find a mentor who has, smooth out the bumps in the next couple of trips that I'm going to take.
Mm-hmm. How do you handle the haters and the naysayers, and especially people? I'm always expanding my circle of influence, and I noticed that as I move up and expand my kind of old circle, it could be a negative comment, it could be sabotage, it could be just, how do you handle these types of the naysayers or the haters on your path?
A very good question and very good point. It's really a capability. You've got to start. At first, you don't do a good job, but what you have to shove those people off. And so I try not to associate with people. It's corny and it's a cliche, but you really should surround yourself with people who are going to help you. And the naysayers never help you. The negative people never help you. And I don't associate. Now I can have that choice. Early in my life, I couldn't. And I found out that one of my lack of capability was I was a bad politician, so I couldn't work for a big company. And I worked for Lehman Brothers, and the boss was one of these terrible people, awful, just a real ugly person, fired people and so forth and so on. And I found that I had to leave Lehman Brothers. I couldn't go to Morgan Stanley or First Boston because there were other people like that at different companies. Go to a smaller company where you can exercise your passions, establish your principles, find your right partners, get a better chance. You'll still have people like that. And one of the things you could do, and as you get farther along in your career, is you can work with some of those people and ask them questions. But if the person's truly negative and he's a naysayer and he's trouble or she's trouble, you should really eliminate them for your life, eliminate them for your business and so forth. These are the destructive people. They won't do anything. This particular guy is my boss, ended up wrecking the company. And it took a 130-year-old company and took it down the drain. And to sell it for almost nothing and so forth. So this is destructive. It really is destructive. So it's a very hard thing to do, but the naysayers, I would try to stay away from as far as possible, if you can, early on in your life. Now, my wife said I should have gotten out of there. I was there 7 years. She said, after 4 years, I realized where I was, but I felt, you can't just sometimes leave. So you got to put up with it. And I think that also one of the things about naysayers, what I found is if they say something negative, don't respond, but take actions which proves that they're not correct. Mm-hmm. And don't even throw it back at them. Just do it. Mm-hmm. Then we'll see that what they were saying is wrong. They're just wrong. I did this with certain, someone said, don't fire someone. Instead of saying, he's a good guy. No, I went to the guy, I worked with him. Now, if he was no good, I would get rid of him, but I would try to work and find out what the problems were between the two of them. And if I correct this guy's problem, then they'll probably say, he isn't that bad. And then you win that war. So again, there are some people, one of the problems with our present administration is they don't realize that there are bad guys in the world. Some people that are just bad, but in most cases, people are. You can help them get to neutral anyway.
Interesting. Yeah. How do you handle, or how do you forgive? Because I've seen, like I said, the super achievers and the superstars, and they've really achieved something really remarkable. They give back. And at some point, it was really great. Like my friend he was talking about at some point when you reach a certain level, it's like either your past can either self-destruct or you can actually just let go and find greater meaning. How do you forgive once you're at this highest level?
Well, one of the things is to understand, I should have hated my father, and the first ghostwriter wanted me to do that. But as I studied his life, where he came with an immigrant with nothing, became very wealthy, lost everything, including his mother and his father later on. He corrected demons. As I went through my life, I found people in my business who lost everything also had demons. And also had a background, Middle Eastern background, which treated women not the way they should be treated. So it wasn't his fault. And he did, if I looked at it, did the best job he could, even though I ended up in orphanages and foster homes. And at one point in time, he completely abandoned me, he disappeared. And I didn't find out 50 years later why he disappeared. Turned out that the company he was with, they tried to kill him. He was in court, and he didn't want to burden me with that, so he just abandoned me, and I became a ward of the state. But then in writing my book and going back and doing that research, I found out so I could forgive him. But to get to your bigger question, I think, in my mind, life is, Levinson wrote a book called Stages of a Man's Life, or Stages of Today a Person's Life. Is basically, I think there are different points in your life when you are making it, making your mark and making compensation, financial security. So then at a certain point in your life, I believe you should pivot toward more community giving back. Because giving back, by the way, it's a selfish thing. You get much more than you give. Being chair of the board of trustees at the University of Rochester was a great experience, but I closed my hedge fund because I learned early in life, you can't do too many different things. Closed the hedge fund, and I basically became the chair of the board of trustees at the University of Rochester. I made 70 trips in 8 years. We raised a record amount of money, $1.3 billion, more than they raised previously cumulative in the previous 150 years. More scholarships, more new professors, $900 million with concrete on the ground. Terrific satisfaction. At one point in time, I had over 20 scholarship students. I now have 8, can't afford 20 every year, but I have a number of other institutions where I have scholarship. And during that period, there was one young lady who was my early scholarship student, started out as an optical engineering major. She ended up as a PhD in optical engineering, got her MBA in her spare time, concert pianist, concert violinist, got up in front of a bunch of people and said, wasn't for Mr. Hajim, I wouldn't be here. Now, that took care of everything I ever did. So I believe that everybody should pivot at some point in time. And maybe you don't give up being the CEO, but you start to move in that direction. And I was lucky enough that at a stage when I was 72 when I became chairman of the board of trustees. So my business career wasn't over, but I brought basically closure to it by selling the company the second time. I bought it, sold it to Xerox, bought it back and sold it again to a large Dutch company, ING. So I had closure to my business career. I didn't need to make any more money. And there I bring in a concept by Howard Stevenson, business school, just enough. I'd like to tell people just enough fame, just enough money, just enough family, just enough everything. So set limits as to where we want to go. When you get there, I don't need any more money, but I do need some more giving back because I've gotten an awful lot and it's time for me to give back. And if I can find something to help me, a scholarship, that if I can use that, and I do believe that's one of the crucial areas when a kid has made it through the 17th or 18th year and all he or she needs is some funding to take the next step, I think it could change lives and make big difference. Now, if you have a cancer problem or some other kind of problem you want to solve, those problems, that's fine with me too. It's up to you. But for me, this was actually pretty much an easy decision that I really wanted to help young people to take that next step. And I'm still moving in that direction. But I do believe there are stages of your life when you work a lot harder to make a living, and later on in time you give back. And if you have that opportunity, and you don't have to be wealthy, you can just start through. I mean, there's a girlfriend of mine is fairly successful, but she doesn't have a lot of money, but she's giving back constantly. And she does a much better job with the scholarship students than I do. I have 20 of them. I know 1 or 2 of them. She has 1 or 2 of them. She really knows them. She keeps track of them. She goes to their weddings. She counsels them. God bless her. She's fantastic. So each person can do his own. There's an 82-year-old woman who up in Minneapolis that I met, basically, that counsels nurses because she was a nurse. And that doesn't cost any money at all. But there is stages of your life where you should give back, and some people can do it earlier and other people can't. It's up to you. But I do believe that, and in this life, with people who are living to 100, they're going to have to pivot a number of times. And you might be able to pivot into giving back and pivot back into work in your lifetime.
Yeah, really well said. Because I really I want to get wisdom. I go to individuals such as yourself, and when I want to see the future, I talk to my niece and nephew, and we'll talk about philanthropy and giving back and just basically setting the future generation for success. And one question before that is, a lot of people think that United States has become too big and overspending and allocating money to things like war and not really focusing on the bigger issues like education, healthcare, politics, finance, the economy, the environment. And so do you think America is like still the greatest country, or because I know people are moving to Asia and Europe and to start companies and with a more, what are your thoughts on American competitiveness?
America is the greatest country in the history of the world. And the principles behind America, the first country in history where there is this American dream where you can be like you, me, little Jewish kid, an Asian person. We can make it. We can make it. And it's the first time it's out. The multicultural society is truly an experiment. And we've been relatively successful in doing that, in integrating people and so forth. Historically, though, you only get a certain amount of time in the number one seat. Portuguese, the Spanish, the English, and that you do fade after a while. And there's a number of books out now which are talking about the big cycles, the fourth turning, end times, the storm before the calm. I do believe, though, we're one of the few nations in history which can rebound again. But I don't know. We don't work as hard as we used to. Our education system is not as good as it was before. That's for sure. And this Dalio book talks about the elements that make a great society. We're also a smaller country than the Chinese. They're 4 times our size. But their system is not as good as ours, that's for sure. But they're 4 times as hard. And because of they still have a very large, poor population, they work a little harder than we do. But if you look around the world, there isn't too many places still, unlike England that built its empire on other countries. We still are one country, and we do have these oceans on either side. And the storm before the calm says we're going to have a very tough 4 or 5 years, but then we'll come out of it again as a different country, but the same country that's multicultural, that has a chance for entrepreneurs to be successful and so forth. But I don't know. It's a little scary to me. I also believe that the period of time that we've just gone through is second to none. Even in Greece in the age of Pericles, I'm not sure that was good. This has been an unbelievable period. The amount of wealth that we created, not only in America, but around the world. We could argue about globalization, and I think they did it. They didn't do it quite correctly, but I don't know whether I could have done any better, but it did it killed, there were 50 million Americans which were hurt, people working in refrigeration plants in Ohio and so forth. But we did lift 1 billion people out of poverty. So you can argue that it was a bad idea because it hurt America, but by letting Walmart be very successful, we're taking in imports from all over the world. We lifted 1 billion or maybe 2 billion people out of poverty. So there's less poverty now than ever before. There's more medical science than ever before. This crazy thing is this little machine we've got is really unbelievable. I take a lot of use of my language every morning. I study words on it every morning. I'm not on TikTok, but I'm learning. I'm on Instagram now, which scares me to death. But no, this really unbelievable machine, and it's 20 years old. So I don't know what's next. AI is next, and we'll see how that does. But America I think probably might have some more juice after this very difficult period. The $35 trillion worth of debt just doesn't. It doesn't. And you see, both candidates, nobody's mentioned the deficit. It's just driving me crazy. It's probably the most important problem. One of these mornings, someone's going to say, we don't want any more of those securities. But so far, we're the least dirty shirt in the laundry. I've traveled the world as you probably have, and there isn't any place better. Switzerland is better. Norway may be better. Singapore may be better, but they're just tiny operations, You can't do that with the size that we have. They just, but we've made some mistakes, which we have in the past. And, it's not, and this is one of those non-simple periods, it's a very complicated period. That's why I want to put some more emphasis on young people and in early stages of college, freshman year. They spend a little more time thinking about themselves and how they fit into the system.
Yeah. And it's really wonderful, the charity and the philanthropy work that you're doing for the next generation. And so for the audience listening to this, someone in their teens or early career, if you were to tell them to focus on one thing, like one skill, one industry, what would that be? And helping people plan?
I'll go back to my book and look at my drivers. The government, the economy, technology, geography, all those things are drivers. Find something that your passion tells you that you can get the wind at your back. There's no one industry, because AI, if you're not, technically inclined, you don't want to do that. But find something that's going to grow over the next 10 or 20 or 30 years that you're excited about, and use those drivers. What is the government going to do that's going to move the needle? What's the economy going to do that's move the needle? AI is obviously one place, and I would say that you're almost pretty sure AI curing Alzheimer's. There are some things that really have to be done. Alzheimer's must be cured, but if we don't do that by 2050, you're going to have 35 million people with Alzheimer's. And you can't have 35 million healthcare workers. It doesn't work. So there are certain things that have to be done. Climate change, and I believe climate change has some other aspects to it. I would love to see the automobile companies develop 100-mile-per-gallon cars instead of us spending a lot of money on a lot of things these EVs are going to be very complicated. They're blowing up with salt water. It gets very cold. They're not so good. But I think there are other things we can do that just the insulation alone would decrease the use of fossil fuels and so on. But I would say find something that you're excited about that gets you the wind at your back. I was very lucky. I got into the stock market. I was in the stock market for 15 or so years. But in 83, I took over a brokerage firm. And the market was 1,000 and it went to 40,000. So I was smart, but I had the wind in my back. Look at all these other people that have done well. Here's a friend of mine who went into the glass business, and it was a terrible industry. But turns out halfway through, he said, what's going to happen is we need 45 glasses, glass automobiles. He got into this business of making glass for automobiles. Off it went. And just things like that. If the whole entertainment business is just came on crazy, and there's all kinds of spots there for people. So more than one thing. You have to pick one thing, it'd have to be AI today. If it's AI has all, it's a big spread, lots of different things in AI. In fact, I think if you're a sociologist, you still have a job in AI because it's going to affect people on a social basis. Companies are going to have counselors in there when they have real problems. Into the whole robotic area. At Rochester, we have a big robotics experience. If you think about certain industries that will be destroyed by the ability to work much faster, it's worrying. But I think the AI it's a cliche today. And by the way, I think it's going to have a little more problems than people think. You look at the number, nobody's making a lot of money from AI. But I'm more back to the person, find something that you're excited about that'll be many times its present size. On the beginning of that S curve. And all these things, there are a lot of things in the world that needs doing. Arguably, geography is really one of the other major problems. I tell the story about my middle son who went to Colorado, got a master's degree in architecture, went into the real estate business. Miss. And even more than that, one of my classmates from Harvard in 1964 went to Hong Kong, and his father had a little tiny real estate company. Yeah. He's a billionaire. It was a piece of cake, Hong Kong real estate. Yeah. And that didn't answer your question because there isn't one thing for everybody. There are certain parts of, I believe there's certain demands for medical science that will may even exceed. But you have to be excited about that. And you got to have each thing has its own characteristics. The reason I didn't go into venture capital in medical science is it just takes a long time. And I'm an patient guy.
Bonus question. I know because you come from financial services and because I'm a Gen X, and I'm just curious how you from the financial, from the wealth, that caliber, how you view this new asset class, digital asset class, in particular Bitcoin, because I just want to get your thoughts on
Bitcoin. I own Bitcoin because my middle son. But 3 years ago, he said, you have to own Bitcoin. I was saying it's a fraud. It's a fraud. Me and Jamie Dimon. Yeah. Then I started to study it, and I realized that it's a very fascinating piece of paper. Think about it. It's the first commodity in history, and he didn't tell me this, first commodity in history where when the price goes up, the volume doesn't go up. When gold price goes up, they open more gold mines. When uranium price goes up, when Bitcoin goes up, you get less of it. Now, and also given the fact that everybody is printing paper money, if you plot paper money versus Bitcoin, supply demand, Bitcoin attracts. So I own a bunch of Bitcoin, not buying anything else. I think the rest of the stuff, I'll do almost as well in Bitcoin as I'll do in anything else. But the legal part of it is, I think, useful. The illegal part of it is huge. There are whole industries in the world which don't want to be in any known currency. I'm not crypto nut. I think it's another asset class. By the way, I'm not alone. The University of Wisconsin, I think now, is a group in Arizona is in it. I guess the kids at Stanford have added it to the Stanford endowment. There was a list put out about 2 months ago of about a dozen. Biggest one of all is Fidelity. Basically, has sprinkled. They and BlackRock have spread angel dust on it. They basically have funds, so they made it illegal. And so the ETFs basically made it legal. So I think that it's here to stay, and it could become. The Chinese have eliminated Chinese. There's a Hong Kong ETF coming. There's an Australian ETF coming. I think it'll be a part of your portfolio. And so far, it's less than 1%. So I think it'll go to some percentage, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5. So Now, the craziness that the next stop is from 60,000 is 500,000, I'm not from. But if that happens, I want to be on board. I remember vividly when I was starting the business, I got fascinated by something called the OTC market. And the old colleges would say, you can't go in the OTC market. I said, my God, the spreads in there are enormous. And these companies are really interesting. And so what they say, I had to stay away. The fact is, when I was at business school, it was still bonds. If you buy bonds, stock yielded more than bonds in those days. So crypto it's an asset class that's here to stay. I'll every legitimate organization or at least consider it. Rochester hasn't yet. I don't blame. Guy's very smart. He'll probably wait a little longer. But I think it's an interesting that it has some value of exchange, and it also has a constituency. People that just don't want it, people that know they have it. Plus the fact I think that it doesn't increase in volume when price goes up, and that's a unique thing in the history of any kind of asset class. When a stock price goes up, they sell you stock. This is so different. Yeah, yes. What do you think about that? Am I making?
Well, I invested very early for the same reasons, and I've seen it fluctuate, just all these hacks and Ponzi's, but now we have regulatory clarity, and we have with the ETFs, we have tax laws around the buying and selling. It's a digital property, so the thing it has staying power, and it's still very early. But like I said, some people hate it, some people love it, and I just wanted to get your perspective.
Yeah, I very well accept it as an asset class. It's practically legitimate. And people say, does it go up? I usually go up. Last time was at 69, it went to 16. You're consolidating, and it takes everybody got to get all those people out of there that are worried it's going back again. But I don't think it's going back. It may break 57 a little bit, but it's going to be here forever. And you get another, but we are printing. Everybody's printing money. It's just unbelievable. And you're not printing any more Bitcoin.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And I really enjoyed this talk, and keep up the great work.
Good, Chris. If you read my books, I appreciate it if you comment on them. Just write me a little note, or maybe go to Amazon and give me a little rating and review. I'd appreciate that. Lots of luck on may the force be with you. And I'm glad we got on here finally.